Welcome to this week's episode of The World According to Craig. And as usual, I am thrilled, excited to welcome one of my friends who does something that I honestly have a lot of genuine questions about. Former, or I guess you always have a title, Staff Sergeant Dustin Holcomb. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So you are an incredible veteran, and I really want to talk a lot about how we as a society and people relate to veterans, what veterans need, and all of those things. But first, I would love for everyone to get to know you a little bit and how you ended up sitting in the chair across from me, aside from my badgering you to come join me on this podcast.
Well, it didn't take much badgering.
So did you grow up always wanting to go into the military? What was that decision like? Like, when did you watch a cartoon at 8 and be like, because I thought about going into the military because I was like, I'll look really good in a uniform. And then I realized that that's not a reason to go into the military.
No, it is not. For me, there was a kind of a family tradition in the Navy. Both of my grandfathers were in the Navy. I had an uncle that worked in the nuclear subs in the 80s. I had a cousin that was Navy, and, just kind of down the list. But, for me, I just didn't want to be stuck on a tin can with a bunch of other dudes. So, for 6 months or more at a time. So I decided I wanted to be on the ground, but it was more a matter of just kind of something that, even growing up and playing around the house and make believe with my brother and stuff like that, it was just always kind of a direction I kind of veered toward. So from that standpoint, it was just always something like I grew up wanting to be a helicopter pilot. Okay. And being raised very religious, no guns, no killing, all that stuff. I mean, vegan. Like, my mom is that against killing that she doesn't even want to kill animals for food.
All right,
like,
I'm never giving up my cheeseburgers.
I am surprised that, we can eat corn because, I've heard, that it can like scream or something when you're cutting it down or something. So, at some point she had to run out of things. Okay, that's dead enough that you can't actually kill it. You can eat that.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's how against killing my mom is.
Oh, wow.
So that's the
hard swing.
That's the household I grew up in. So, and again, I was fascinated by the military, fascinated by helicopters flying. So I decided that, at like 6, 7, 8 years old, like, my goal was to become a rescue helicopter pilot.
I mean, that's an ambitious career choice. Yes. I have ridden in a helicopter. That's an intense situation.
It's really fun.
So what was it like going in? Because I remember in high school, people took like aptitude tests, and then I grew up in rural Indiana in a town of 10,000 people. So they were very heavy on the military recruitment because it was a stable life, right? Like, for a lot of people who didn't know where they could go, what to do, it was an opportunity. Was the stability, exploring the world? Was it, the regimented routine, like the patriotism? Like, what drew you in aside from the excitement of being a rescue helicopter pilot that would terrify me?
For me at that point, once I finally, was an adult and was 19, if you can consider that truly an adult.
Like, I had
no idea what I was doing.
I can't believe we let 25-years make decisions. And because when I think what I was like when I was 25.
I was coming home from Iraq at 25. Actually on my way to Iraq at 25.
I was at a bar and a club, so you were light years ahead of me. So
I turned 21 on a field training exercise, blowing stuff up on the range.
Okay.
That was my 21st birthday.
Okay. That actually sounds enjoyable.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
I had a really good time.
The Iraq part, not so
much. And like 2 days, later came back and got shit house drunk. So
okay, there you
go. But for me, it was, at that point, my dad had left when I was 10. I had completely changed, over that, 9-year period from the time that my dad left until I joined the military. I completely changed who I was, who I wanted to be. I had this just never-ending chip of anger on my shoulder and insecurity, and so I just wanted to be as big and bad and scary as I could be, which is exactly what my recruiter was looking for.
We can address the recruitment standard, the recruitment targets for the U.S. government another time.
Yes,
that's okay.
So from that standpoint, I was exactly what they were looking for. From a mentality and a physicality standpoint, it was like you're over.
You're not a small guy.
Yeah,
so
you're over 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and you want to and you want to be aggressive. Okay, cool. So then took the aptitude test, the ASVAB. I scored very well on that out of, over, it was like 206 jobs. My recruiter's like, well, you qualified for like 202. So
Okay.
what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to blow shit up. And he goes, oh, I got the job for you. We're going to make you a fire support specialist. I'm like, I don't want to put fires out. And he goes, no, 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 no. You're telling all the big guns where to shoot. And I was like, okay, let's do that.
Okay. So you became a fire support specialist. What was it like going in? Because I don't think when we think, most Americans aren't even aware. We talk about the military industrial complex and all these things, but most Americans don't get into the detail of realizing that there are millions of people in active duty in the military, to say nothing of veterans and reserve and everything else.
Right.
And there's a whole training program to go in, which is substantial and regimented and terrifying from what I've seen in movies. And that probably doesn't even do it justice.
It wasn't terrifying for me because at that point I'd moved so many times and been in so many different environments, having been homeschooled, it was just,
But you had to get up at 4 a.m. every day, right?
Somewhere around there, sometimes earlier. Our first morning of basic training, it was February 17th of 99.
Okay.
And Fort Sill, Oklahoma. They woke us up at like 3:30 in the morning, lined us up in single file, and it was basically get your uniforms, get dressed, go line up, get your head shaved, and then walk through a doorway, and they're going to hit you with 3 immunization or vaccine guns at the same time, the air guns. Like you literally walk through the door, it's like,
Oh, so you got shot at from the beginning.
yeah, from day one.
Okay.
Like 4 o'clock in the morning is literally walk through the doorway, and there's 3 people with injection guns,
Okay.
trying to get you from right that moment.
Okay.
And then you walk around the corner from there, and you pull your pants down, you get a penicillin shot in the butt, and that's literally your introduction to basic combat training. And
that goes on for 12 weeks.
9 weeks.
9 weeks. Okay.
9 weeks. And then first you sit in a holding center while they completely dehumanize you, and you become the uniform and your bunk and your gear and all that stuff. And then you have to go through all these shots and immunizations and all this stuff. And then you get to go to actual basic training once you pass a preliminary PT test, so that they know that you're actually fit enough to not die on day one.
Got it. So the Trump bone spur doesn't do you in.
Right.
Yes.
So then you go to basic training, and then it's 9 weeks of them turning you into a weapon.
Well, and that's a part to really zero in on, because you go in, even if you are big and aggressive and you want to blow shit up, right? Like you're still a human, right? Like you're still grown up in regular society. And even in a military family, and there aren't that many. There's so many more people who don't come from those families.
Right.
You come from a human place, and they want to turn you into a weapon, because that's the nature. And you need to be able to follow orders on a snap judgment. You need to be able to fire and kill someone and do whatever.
Not even on a snap judgment. That you need to follow orders without even a reaction. It's
right, because the chain of command is critically important in that vein.
100%.
But I think people also don't realize that when you go into the military, you are governed by an entirely different separate set of laws called the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Absolutely.
And you can be punished for things that you cannot be punished for in regular world, and you're essentially government property.
You are government property. You can get fined, demoted, and extra duty for getting a sunburn because you have damaged government property.
This is troubling to me, and yet I'm just imagining every time I would get a hangover, they'd be like, "You've damaged government property." But what am I supposed to do?
You'd be an E1 forever.
Yes. So it's a little bit interesting in that vein, because once you become government property, the government can keep you, right? Which is a somewhat controversial program.
They have full control over you for up to 8 years,
right,
from the time you raise your right hand.
And so then if you decide to exit your contract at the end of your contract, there was a program during the Iraq War called Stop Loss, where the government could literally tell you, sorry, you're staying.
Right. And I was involuntarily extended, was the nice way that they said it, was the actual orders that I got. Staff Sergeant Holcomb, you've been involuntarily extended till this
Which
day.
is a bit like telling anyone, like a used car salesman, like, you need to show up every day until we tell you don't. Like, I feel like that alone can be a traumatic experience. And you were considering a lifelong career at that point, and then they basically didn't even bother to ask you about that.
Right.
They just were like,
They didn't
screw
offer
you.
me any extra money, no bonus, no nothing. They're like, no, you're going to Iraq and have fun.
What does that feel like when you're like, okay, so the people I thought cared about me that are
at that point, I was not under any impression that they gave a shit about me.
Okay.
Other than that, they, I was good at my job. And so they wanted me to go to Iraq. So I knew that. And it was easier to keep me going than it was to train somebody new. Because again, I was very proficient at my job.
Got it. And I think there's a lot of controversy which will set aside as to whether we should be in Iraq or not, or how we should have handled things or not. But the reality is that there are hundreds of thousands of people on the ground there at that time who were doing their level best to make this not turn into a show.
Yeah.
And while policymakers in Washington were debating things, you were on the ground getting shot at and actually blown up and losing friends every step of the way.
Well, while, what I was sent to Iraq for was very different than what I was actually fighting for. Because, at the end of the day, you're, in your heart of hearts, you're fighting for whatever cause that you believe in. And whether it's we believe that we were looking for WMDs, whether, whatever the case was, at the end of the day, what we saw, the insurgency that we saw, we just knew that we did not want that coming home. Whatever it took, like whatever we needed to do while we were there to make sure that our families didn't have to face that. That's what kept me going every day.
Well, and I think that people don't necessarily process it that way, and probably should. I remember I was talking to a group of nonprofits when the Ebola outbreak was happening in West Africa to draw a corollary, and they said, we can't seem to get Americans to pay attention. And I said, oh, you're using the wrong messaging. You were saying, let's help the people in West Africa. What you need to be saying is, give us money or Ebola is coming to America, right? Like keeping things off our shores is people talk about, oh, well, should we be abroad and that sort of thing, but keeping violence and insurgency and terrorism off of our shores is one of the military objectives for being there. And I don't know that people necessarily process. It's like this peaceful, tranquil lifestyle that we get to lead for all intents and purposes, for all the terrorist attacks we have had on domestic soil and that sort of thing. It's nothing compared to what other countries experience on a day-to-day basis. At
the end of the day, do you want your mom and sister at risk, or do you want his mom and sister at risk? Which
is an unfortunate choice, right? Like that's the answer.
But at the end of the day, they're bound and determined to fight.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is it's a horrible choice to be put in, but it's one that you're confronted with as a military officer. That's crazy that you have to confront those choices on every single day, because the vast majority of everyone gets to go around and be like, well, no, we shouldn't be over there. And I'm like, I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't and all those things. I'm just saying, I don't know that any of us
are.
I don't have, yeah, we are.
We are. There's no unringing that bell.
Right. You're not unpregnant.
We now have to figure out, okay, what is the best path forward? This bell has been rung. This act has been taken.
And that act has resulted in millions of people living a life that we cannot even fathom. And the part that frustrates me most that I see, we've spoken about in the past, is that policymakers are not being informed by people who have been in your shoes or any veteran or active duty member's shoes, right? Like I have no idea, thankfully, what it's like to get shot at. I have no idea what it's like to hold a best friend as they die or to get blown up. You got blown up by an IED, right? And I mean, I can't even imagine how you fathom that experience. I don't even know how I would begin to process that information.
It took me 15 years to process just the terror of being blown up. It was literally a few weeks ago that I finally had a full on just broke down and cried for a day. That I finally, after reading some emails that, a family friend had written 15 years ago, it finally actually penetrated and sunk in what I'd gone through. And it just wrecked me for a day. And it wasn't even sorrow, sadness, nothing. It was just processing that terror that I'd never done before.
Well, and yet we have a whole lot of people working domestically who've never experienced that terror, never had to process it, trying to develop policy around what it's like to process a terror, which seems to me like a stupid idea.
Well, they're going to listen to the people that are paying for their campaigns, not the soldiers who are bleeding on the front lines and coming home and killing themselves because there's no money in that.
Well, I mean, and so that brings us to the next question, which is, we put people through at least weeks of basic training, and we train them, we turn them into weapons. That is the goal of the military, and we're very good at that.
Absolutely. But we have centuries and millennia of
The U.S. military
study on how to do it properly.
Yeah, the U.S. military is very, very effective, but we don't untrain people to become weapons. We just, I mean, this should be disturbing to anyone who's listening, but we don't. We create weapons, and then they finish their tour of duty, and they re-enter society as weapons, not by their own volition or their own choice, but because the U.S. government has no re-entry program.
Right.
You get your checkup at the VA if you wait 6 weeks and
It wasn't
10
even
hours.
6 weeks. Well, it's so I had 9 weeks of basic training. Within the first week, they put a weapon in my hands, and from that moment, anytime I had my weapon out, I was my weapon number. I wasn't Private Holcomb. I was 047. And we were released from formation by numeric order with a chant. 001, one shot, one kill. 002, aim center mass. 003, one shot, one kill. 004, aim center mass. All the way through until everyone was released and everybody had turned their weapon into the arms room. That's literally the first week, and every single time we had our weapons out, every single day we spent on the range, everything, that's how we were released from formation. You are a weapon. This is a tool. Put it away. Go to bed. Wake up. Do it again tomorrow. So that was 9 weeks of that. Then you go to your advanced individual training where they teach you what your actual job is, which was an additional 7 weeks. So we're talking 16 weeks of
Every
kill,
day.
kill, kill.
Yes.
Here's how to kill. Here's the most efficient way to kill. Here are your tools to kill. Here's how you say how you want to kill people, right? That's what you do for 4 months. And then they send you to your first duty station. I was there for 2 years. And the thing is when I came back, the first time I met with a counselor at the VA was less than a month after I'd been back from Iraq, from war, from losing 16 of my friends, from being blown up, from being shot at, from RPGs flying by me, like all this stuff, right? Less than a month. It was one session. One of the questions they asked me is if I thought I had superpowers. And I was like, is this a joke? Are you kidding me? And really
Such a stupid question.
In retrospect, what I realized is their entire purpose behind that was to give me a clean bill of health mentally and physically as soon as possible so that they were no longer liable for any chaos that followed me. They're like, oh no, well, he was fine when he got out.
And that is fundamentally disturbing, right? Like
16 weeks of
It's a
here's how you
liability
kill.
question.
16 weeks of here's how you kill
And
people.
a decade of
and
them
then
killing.
sending you 6 years and then additional training and then a full year of doing it and then go home. Oh no, you're fine. Have fun.
And
Have a great life.
I mean, it's tragic and it's not shocking then that there are 22 people who commit suicide
Not
every
even
single
slightly.
day. I mean, how do you even begin to process reentering society? I mean,
You have to detrain soldiers from being soldiers.
and now we're asking
train
soldiers
them.
to detrain themselves.
Right.
So whatever programs that exist with nonprofits, and there are lots of laudable ones, they are not even a drop into the
They're
bucket. It's
scratching
like
the surface.
spitting into a hurricane, I think is the phrase, right?
Well,
Like
and it's all voluntary. That's the problem.
because as a military, you don't have to follow orders anymore. You're not
Right.
in the military, so you don't.
So
have
the
to
last
show
thing
up.
you want to do is be told to get well when you are a civilian now. Like, oh, I'm a civilian. I don't have to do what I'm told anymore.
Right.
I'm not under orders. I'm not under USCMJ.
Basic re-entry training while you're still in the military and have to follow orders
Should
would
be
seem-
mandatory.
It seems like 101 policy. It's shocking to me. I mean, it's not shocking. In LA, we the mayor created a Department of Veterans Affairs in 2013 and didn't bother to hire a director until 2018, and that director's never been shot at. So, I don't know. The policymaker judgments are really great here. So you're back into society, and the question that everybody wants to know, and the question that I want to know is like, I don't even know how to fathom these things. Like I've never even, up until this last year, I had never even known anyone who had died, period.
Yeah.
Much less somebody who had died tragically. You lost 16 friends, your best friend, you yourself were blown up and nearly died. And I laugh not because it's funny, because I literally don't even know how to fathom that now you re-enter society and we have all kinds of parades and thank you for your service and 4th of July, and people get drunk at their barbecues. And I think people genuinely do there are people who genuinely appreciate service members even without knowing what they're appreciating. I don't even know that they would know how to begin to have a conversation about it. Like, how do you even begin to engage someone who's lived such a different life to understand the trauma that they're going through. I mean, you have this phrase that you use a lot about freedom, and I don't know that we actually even understand that. It's this concept of paying interest on.
Yeah. So the cost of freedom is real, tangible, and steep. We who return home pay the interest on that cost for the rest of our lives.
And I don't think that the public understands that's a loan payment. Like it's like, it doesn't, like, if you stop paying it,
we're not even paying the principal at all. It's just an interest payment.
And if you stop paying it, like, all hell breaks loose, right?
All hell, yeah.
So, I mean, if somebody says, thank you for service, what do they need to know? If you were to say, listen, they're never going to know what it's like to have a bullet whiz by their brain, right?
Yep.
So what do they need to know about service to properly understand what you go through coming back in? Like, what was it like, aside from this horrible VA appointment, what was it like coming back into society?
For me, I dove straight into work. I became a personal trainer. I was working 7 days a week. I mean, at one point I trained 14 different clients in one day, just because it was all I knew, working 7 days a week. We were on 9-day work weeks in Iraq, and it was just, nonstop. Even our 1 day off was just preparing for the next 9 days of missions. And so I just came back. I was working 7 days a week. I was training clients, and I had to interact. I had to be social. I had to be extroverted, because that's how you sell something, especially when you're selling yourself. So that was a huge, and I still credit becoming a personal trainer in the fitness industry in general for getting me through the first 10 years out. But then it was, okay, I need more. There's more to me. There's more that I have to unpack. There's more that I need to work on. So, getting down to that, my question would be, what type of questions, what gets you to open up to somebody about the deep, dark things? How does somebody get you?
So yes.
Exactly. So for me, it's a matter of when somebody shows that genuine interest, there is that deep, dark corner of, okay, like, we'll take a peek and see how you react type thing. And when somebody genuinely shows interest, actual concern, when it does not come across as patronizing or them being terrified,
right?
Then it's much easier to open up and talk about certain experiences and things along like that. But the big thing is the camaraderie, the brotherhood that we had, the respect we had for each other, the different backgrounds. Like, there's no race, there's no sexual orientation, there's no nothing. It is the guy who's next to you, and your life is dependent on him, and his life is dependent on you. And when you can start talking about relationships, when you start talking about interactions, the things that would interest you and get you to, like, okay, yeah, get you thinking, get your mind turning over. It's those same type of questions with veterans. And so if if you're like, thank you for your service, and it would, the first thing that I'm working toward responding is, number one, you were worth it. Like, every single.
That can often be hard to say for when you see people out in the world.
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, like, I have to also acknowledge the fact that I voluntarily gave that sacrifice so that they could have their freedom to have that opinion.
So
I have to acknowledge that in the first place.
That's a very grown-up thing to do, right?
It is like challenging at times.
I sacrificed so much so that you could scream like a lunatic on a street corner.
And tell me what a fucking idiot I am,
right,
for having gone and that it's my friend's fault that they died and all that.
That's another sacrifice. I mean, and what's interesting to me is there are things that there's so much that we can learn from veterans. Like, I think there's a basic civics education that we need to do. I keep coming back to this thought with everyone in the interview that we know as people individually so little about the world around us.
Yeah.
We've had guests on the show, and one talked about the fact that we know less about the floor of the ocean than we do about the surface of Mars. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
We don't know what's under us. We don't know what's around us. We don't know our city policies around how we create public spaces. We don't know, the vast majority of people never stop to actively process and consciously think about things like the fact that we turned millions of people into weapons. We did not unweaponize them, and then we sent them back into society to fend for themselves.
And we've been doing that for over 200 years.
That fundamental idea is not only baffling to me that we haven't progressed further, but then also we don't learn from those people. The idea, I mean, desegregation had its origins in World War II with mixed race units, because the guy, as you pointed out, the guy being shot at,
Didn't matter what color he was.
and so the camaraderie, we could all use a little bit more camaraderie. Like
Yeah.
where you could vehemently disagree with the belief of the guy in the foxhole next to you,
Yep.
and yet the two of you are on the same team. There's something profound there that we can all learn from.
You would think. You would think.
People, I think, first of all, people just need to understand what the world is like in that vein. And then it's more than snazzy messaging from Wounded Warrior or anyone else. It is
the connection. It is the people that are around veterans. Everyone knows a veteran, at least one. And especially during the holidays, if you can just reach out and say, hey, thinking about you, that can pull somebody out. Now, I had an experience last Wednesday where I had an appointment. I've recently started going to counseling again with the VA. It was my second scheduled session. I'd scheduled it the week before with my therapist for an online video conference. And I waited 30 minutes. It timed out twice, called her office, and her voicemail said that she was out of the office until Tuesday. So for me, it was very frustrating because I hate having my time wasted. Like that's my biggest pet peeve is time is the only resource you cannot replace. Cannot.
You and I say this all the time. It's the only resource you can't get back.
And so when I sit there for 30 minutes and this person has committed to helping me, this entire government organization is committed to helping me, and my second appointment, she can't even shoot me an email saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to be out of the office next week. For me, it was frustrating. As I was going about the rest of my day, and I was driving, I went over to a buddy's house. And what really, really crushed me and terrified me at the same time is, again, we're talking, this is 2 days before Christmas, 2 days after one of the biggest anniversaries that I had in Iraq. Like, I had a lot to talk about. And, you know, and I don't know how much therapy you've done, but it takes me a significant amount of effort to gear up and really truly be prepared for a session.
Yeah.
And
to
have all of that, like, just pent up energy and nowhere for it to go. 2 days before Christmas, thank God I have the support system around me that I do, and the people around me that I do. Like, I mean, I reached out to several people, and just knowing that those people were out there and that they gave a and they cared, I was personally fine. The problem is how many guys are sitting by themselves 2 days before Christmas with a handgun and a bottle of Jack sitting on their coffee table, and the only thing stopping them from pulling the trigger was they were waiting until after that session.
I mean,
and to see how it went.
I'm not often speechless, so this is...
So that was the thought going through my mind as I was driving to my friend's house an hour after I gave up on the VA. I mean, for that day. And that was what crushed me. That was when I was like, I have to do something. I have to fix this somehow, because not everyone has the resource and the support group around them that I do.
I mean, and how many people even make that journey? And if they did, there wouldn't be the resources to accommodate them all. There surely are not enough therapists in the VA.
Absolutely not.
Just, you know, I mean, there's so many people. I think you said it best. It's like, if you know a veteran, just call them. I was like, call them on St. Patrick's Day. Call them on
it
on
doesn't
Easter.
matter. When they crossed your mind, shoot them a text.
I mean, it's so fundamentally simple, and yet it's so profound in that we don't think about all of these things. We go through life and we don't,
because it's not pleasant.
Right.
You don't voluntarily think about things that aren't pleasant. War, suicide, the VA. Oh my God, dude, I was crying my entire way going to the VA 2.5 weeks ago because of the anxiety that I felt, knowing that, number one, I was going to have my time wasted, which I did over the long run. Not in that moment, but you know, I knew at some point they would fuck me over. And number two, just the absolute tangible, cut it with a knife, sadness and depression from the veterans that are in there that are just there hoping someday to get help before they die.
I mean,
And it's tangible. You can feel it.
I mean, I can't even imagine the energy coming out of that building. And it's one of those things where, you know, you spend all this time teaching people in the military not to think, to follow orders, because that it is a life or death situation. We do not have time to debate this. So it needs to be an instinctive reaction to follow orders. And then they get out of the military, and now we ask that they not only untrain themselves as weapons, but they learn to think critically when that skill set has been drilled out of them. We want them to say, okay, what are my feelings and do I need help? And the superhero question is clearly a non sequitur, just designed to assess whether you're a threat to society.
Right.
It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the world around you.
Because they didn't give a about me.
And
at that point, because I was getting out.
And now, even when there are folks in line, I mean, we all hear the headlines about the problems of the VA and the progress we've made. And I think progress in a government sense is not a strong progress. It's not a capital P.
No.
And yet, even with that progress, even with the efforts we make, there's just, I remain convinced we need a comprehensive slate of programs at the national, the state, and the local level. And we have a slate of programs at the federal level, and they're ineffective and they're gigantic, which is why you need local state programs, of which we have barely any, and definitely almost no city programs other than go to the Veterans Hall downtown.
I mean, what if on the way out you had to transition wherever you were going to be going to, if it was local to where you're getting out of the military, you're going back home, whatever the case is. What if there was some kind of test run where they had to report to their local National Guard or reserve unit for X number of time, and it was still part of their military service? They still get paid full, but their entire job at that point for a minimum of 12 weeks should be to get well.
Well, I mean, transparently, I don't know that it may take 12 weeks to make a weapon. It probably takes closer to a year.
Oh, for sure. I'm just saying a minimum of, because like when I got out, I had 7 weeks of terminal leave, literally 49 days of terminal leave. And of those 7 weeks, I spent probably 5 of those weeks on my couch playing video games and drinking rum out of the bottle, because that was how I was kind of coping. And then after that was up, that's when I was like, oh, I should probably get a job. And then I went straight into working 7 days a week.
I mean, and I think that's the fundamental question is like, and we could put, another component of this, we could put so many veterans to work through training programs. If we give them jobs training on the way out in finance and mental health and everything, they're learning, they're 100%. Processing. And then all of these things that we need in the community, we need community engagement leaders. Like, I mean, you think about how many vets were the front line of community engagement in hostile situations. Yeah. So making them community engagement managers domestically seems like a much easier task, right?
Let me ask you this. So look at the camaraderie and the organization and the support group that comes from USC.
Yeah.
Like, how many alumni of USC are helping other alumni of USC and every other college program, right?
Yeah, all the way to extent of bribery and in prison. They love it.
Exactly, right?
They're going straight in.
You don't see this in the military, coming out of the military, like to that level of, you're oh, well, this is a new alumni veteran, veteran of, an alumni of being in the military. We're going to open him, bring him into the community of successful veterans, and we're going to show him the way. Like what happens with alumni from a large school. That doesn't happen from the military. It's okay, well, just don't go kill yourself and try not to, if you do, try not to hurt anybody around you on the way out.
Well, that's a disheartening statement, but it's incredibly accurate. I mean, I think this is the key takeaway, right? Which is we have a massive infrastructure that is designed to keep us all safe, to give us this tranquil existence that we all live in, where there are not rockets flying overhead domestically, when that is 200 years of equity, right? Like we have, people forget that we did have domestic wars a century ago, and those things are important. And the fact that we keep violence at bay, and the military is certainly a part of that deterrent threat is very real. Mm-hmm. We enjoy this lifestyle, and yet we have all of this infrastructure for all of this benefit, and we have almost no infrastructure that welcomes people back. It's an on-demand broken system. And really, the solution seems to be very simple and probably more cost effective in the long run is if we're,
Well, how good is America at recycling plastic?
yeah.
Like if we can't even get plastic right to save the planet, like if we are that discardant of everything around us, where we're just like, just throw it. Who cares where it goes?
Well,
I don't need it anymore.
Well, in the absence of government action, I think today's episode is really about every individual taking that moment and that opportunity.
Yep.
And I am so grateful that you came on to share this message.
I am so excited that
it's so meaningful. And even having known you as long as I have, it's so incredibly meaningful to me to hear these things from you. And I hope that it's meaningful to everyone else too. And with that, I want to say to everyone who is watching or listening, thank you. And thank you for your service, Dustin. But also, if you could just take a minute and text a vet that you know, I think that goes a long way. We often ask about what we can do and we think big programs and government programs, but every individual person has a purpose and an ability to make a difference. And it doesn't require a budget. It doesn't even require text message costs since they're all free now. So pick up your phone and reach out to somebody you know. And that's our core takeaway. And from there, you can have a real conversation like the one we had today. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for tuning in. And I hope to see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to The World According to Craig. But it's not really the world according to me. It's according to some incredible people that I know with real everyday stories that we can all take inspiration from. I hope you'll tune in every week for a new episode of The World According to Craig.